Why are summers at the Donniel Hartman Institute so special?
Because that's when Jewish leaders and learners, like you and me, travel to Jerusalem to wrestle with big ideas and study with Hartman's inspiring faculty.
The Donniel Hartman Institute is a pluralistic think tank and educational center for the Jewish people.
Our scholars draw on 3,000 years of Jewish wisdom to develop the ideas we need to face today's challenges.
This summer, the pandemic has prevented us from traveling, but it doesn't prevent us from learning together. Welcome.
Join hundreds of Jewish leaders for All Together Now, a month-long celebration of ideas from the Donniel Hartman Institute. From now until July the 23rd, come learn with us in this moment of crisis and opportunity.
Hello and welcome to our intensive Beit Midrash session on moral principles and priorities in a changing landscape, ethical pivots in the age of Corona. My name is Jordana Amzel, and I'll be helping out behind the scenes. Here are a few things you need to know before Donniel Hartman starts teaching. This is a webinar Zoom, and all participant videos will be hidden. We will be taking questions at the end of this session, and you can submit your questions in the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. This session will be recorded. You should be able to find the recording of this class on the session page by tomorrow. There will also be an evaluation survey that will pop up on your screen at the end of this session, and we would love for you to complete it. If you haven't already, you can easily access the sources for this session on the same page that you used to open up this Zoom link, which is on the session page on the event website. That's it. Let's get started. It is my pleasure to welcome Donniel Hartman.
Hello, everyone. I think I could say it's really exciting to be with you. In some sense, I'm with you. I can't see you. You could see me. But I know you're out there. And this is a strange time. We know that. And all of us, in different degrees, are broken. Some of us broken more. Some of us cracked. All of us are trying to keep ourselves together, keep our lives going. It is very meaningful and important to me, and important to the whole community of the Hartman Institute, that you've chosen at this moment in your lives to share and to come learn with us. We're learning in a different way, but it's also learning, and it's beautiful. And while for the last number of months, the cup's been broken, and the lot has been empty, today and over the next month, our time together, I don't know if the cup is half full, but it's not empty. It's filled with beautiful opportunities for us to learn. And I'm very excited and touched that you've chosen to learn with us. When you're broken, when you're hurt, when you can't answer the question, how are you? Fine, thank you. Or when the question, everything okay, seems almost obscene. What do you mean, everything is okay? Like, how am I even supposed to deal, in any day am I supposed to deal with that question? But everything okay today? No, everything is not okay. What do I do when everything is not okay? Now, the first thing you're supposed to do is just to try to keep it together. Just to try to keep on living with decency, to be a mensch. When not everything is okay, you try to get through the day. But our tradition, as always, and maybe that's one of the reasons why Judaism was not such a popular religion, because it always pushes us. It always expects more of us. It always wants us, the minute you're comfortable, to say, I want you to take another step. Our tradition in Tractate Brachot says, if tragedy or difficulty or harm befalls you, investigate, explore, check your ways, check your behavior. Now in the Bible, this had a very simple meaning. God, the master, the creator of the universe, the master of all, the one who rules nature, determines nature and history dependent on your behavior. So when the text says, if something is suffering or difficulty befalls you, check your behavior, it means that there is a causal relationship. You did something wrong. And if you change what you did wrong, then God will in turn change that which is harming you. Nature is finely attuned to human behavior. When you're righteous, you prosper. When you're wicked, you suffer. And if you're suffering, it's time for you to look at what it is that you're doing. Now, in the rabbinic tradition, the same statement appears. The same idea appears. But now it has a different meaning. In a world of hester panim, in a world where the rabbis recognize that God's face is hidden, when we don't know how the world is working, when we already know that the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper, we know that there isn't a direct causal relationship between what happens to me and my behavior. And the rabbis still say, if difficulty and harm befalls you, check your behavior. But now it has a completely different meaning, or possibly a completely different meaning. When you're broken, when everything is not right, there is a unique moment for you to look at your existence, for you to look at your life, and to learn. You could say when something difficult happens to you, who's at fault? Who did it to me? Our tradition says and pushes you and says, I want you to use these moments of difficulty as a moment for you to grow. Because when everything is not okay, it's exactly at that moment that you do something very strange. It's as if life sometimes slows down and you see pieces on a micro level that you never saw it before. And you also see your life from a different perspective. When everything is okay, inertia, the status quo is what you're committed to. When I'm not okay, it's a unique moment for you to ask, who do I want to be? Who should I be? Our tradition institutionalizes this with the idea of days of fasting. Whenever a calamity occurs, we stop and we fast. We stop, just like in Shiva, and we say, no, everything is not okay. And now let's look at who we want to be. This is also the whole genre of texts and sources in our tradition, which asks, why was Jerusalem destroyed? Now we know why Jerusalem was destroyed. Jerusalem was destroyed because the Romans destroyed it. And why did the Romans destroy it? Because we started up with them when we shouldn't. We had chutzpah, we misappropriated our power, did not have a correct assessment of who we were and what we're capable of, and we were a mouse which roared and the elephant squashed us. That's one story. But that's the story that nobody in the Jewish tradition ever told. Why was Jerusalem destroyed? Because of senseless hatred. Why was Jerusalem destroyed? Because we didn't go beyond the requirement of the law. Why was Jerusalem destroyed? Reason after reason after reason, as you saw in Tractate Shabbat. Because what I want you to ask is not who victimized you, but how you can use your moments of pain, of being broken, to build something whole. In the famous Hasidic statement, there is nothing more whole than a broken heart. It's not that the brokenness is whole. It's that in the midst of that which is broken, the light could come in and growth is possible. And Jerusalem being destroyed becomes a paradigm. It becomes a concept for what does a city, what does a society, what does a country, what does a community need to do in order to be worthy of survival, in order to be worthy of perpetuation? What are those things that undermine the fabric of a society? We as Jews have suffered greatly throughout history. And our tradition pushed us and said, I never want you to feel sorry for yourself. I want you to ask what you can learn. And that's what I would like to do today. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be with you. Some of you know me, some of you don't. Those of you who know me know I don't have a theory, and I never do, about the meaning of life in general. Huge questions of that magnitude are beyond me. I don't have any special insight. Never have. I don't know how COVID-19 has redefined the meaning of life. What I struggle for is not what is the meaning of life, but how in this moment do I create a life of meaning? How do I improve who I am? How do I grow? Knowing fully well that one thing that's guaranteed, I always have more to grow. I always have another step to take. How do we as a society not merely put our broken pieces together, hold them together, and try to get through the day? How do we use these last few months, and as we all know, the months that are yet to come? How do we use them? Not as something that we just merely have to get through, but how do we, in the midst of our brokenness, recalibrate our thought processes? How do we think anew about who we are? How do we reflect on our values? How has this crisis, how has this pandemic, how has this pain that every one of us has experienced, how has it put a spotlight on us and asked, who are you? What's really important in life? What's most important? What are your priorities? What are the things that you care about that you now don't care about? What are the things that you cared about that you want to look at again, and now it has a whole new meaning? What are those values that you quoted? You might even put them up on the walls as art. You know, when Jewish texts become art, then I get nervous because then we don't have to think about them anymore. Now it's just blah, it's out there. No, how do we take it off the wall? How do we take it off the library and put it into our souls in a different way? Oh, I know how to quote all the right things. You know, all human beings are created in the image of God. I could sound so meaningful and moral and decent all the time, but now each one of these statements has a different consequence. How do we create and recalibrate and refocus our core principles? What's our moral pivot foot? In basketball, the foot that doesn't move. We have to move. And in a time of difficulty, you better be moving because you're constantly being challenged with questions and issues that you never thought about before. But what's your moral pivot foot? That which is constant, that which is standing. That which you say, I don't want to move. Now, I might turn, but that's going to stay steady. Now, we know there's an ancient Jewish tradition that before someone dies, they share a moral and ethical will. Source 10, Rabbi Akiva did that with his son. Now, when you come to find your moral pivot, just like when you're coming to write your ethical will, you're not saying, follow the Jewish tradition. Listen, when you have 613 commandments and 4,792 rabbinic interpretations and developments of these commandments, you're never going to follow all of the law. It's not about saying, okay, do everything. No, what you do is you engage in something very personal. You look at the whole spectrum of your tradition, of your teachings, of your sources, and you collect for yourselves those that at this moment you want to look at again. At this moment, somehow shine brighter. At this moment, somehow seem to be more significant. At this moment, maybe you recognize that you're challenged on them and therefore you have to focus on them more. And so this is what I want to do today. I want to share with you my ongoing attempt as of today to recalibrate my moral pivot foot. To ask myself, not what's the meaning of life, but Donniel, what does life demand of you right now? And how do you think about some of the questions? And what do you bring to the table? What are the lenses that you wear? In doing so, I am going to walk through the thousands and thousands of pages and to pick those that at this moment are important to me. In sharing them with you, I hope, I would like maybe one or two or maybe more of them might be meaningful to you, but would be most meaningful to me. And in many ways, the real purpose of this class is to model a behavior that I hope every single one of you will engage in if you haven't yet engaged it. Because right now, the societies that we're going to be building, the future of the world that we're going to live in, is going to depend on every one of us not just surviving and not just keeping the pieces somehow connected, but asking, how do I build something beautiful and meaningful and important and decent and kind and responsible in this moment? So this is my list. Feel free to take some of them. As my colleague Avi Sagi pointed out, there's a difference between something personal and something private. As a teacher, I'm not engaged only in something private. Even though it has private significance to me, I'm hoping that some of it will have significance for you. And in that sense, it's personal but not private. But what's most personal is not merely the content of what I'm about to share, but the idea itself. And one that I hope you will engage in individually, as a family, collectively. And hopefully you'll grow and find meaning in this process. And then in a number of months, we're all going to stand together. And we're going to look back and we're going to see who we're standing with. Who are those people who you could see their moral core and who together could shape a future for our community, for our people, for our nations. And so, let's begin. I know you could see me, and now I just want to share it. I imagine you're there, but all I see is this empty Beit Midrash, and I'm trying to feel you. I'm trying to feel you here with me. To say that I feel you here with me is the thing I'm supposed to say, but I don't know if I fully feel it yet, but I'm trying. I'm trying. I hope you at least feel that you're with me. One of the core principles that I've quoted all the time and has been with me throughout my life, but these last few months has taken on new urgency, new meaning, new priority. And I felt the need to think about it. And that is the core idea in our tradition of the ultimate sanctity of life, that you shall live by Torah and not die by Torah. The idea that life takes precedence over all of Jewish law. Now, you have to realize that in a monotheistic tradition, the idea that life takes precedence is not self-evident. Not self-evident at all. Remember, we're talking about God here. And God very often wants to see your sacrifice. Rabbi Akiva, on the day of his death, was saying, "Oh, I'm so happy today. I'm plotzing with joy." Why? Because I know that God, I wanted to die for God. Dying for God is intimately connected to the idea of monotheism. It's a sign, listen, you're walking with the God, creator of the universe. Sacrifice. Humility in the eyes of God. An opportunity to sanctify God's name. What could be more noble? Yet in our tradition, there is a core idea. The idea that life takes precedence. But let me stop for a second because there's something that I forgot. This summer, one of the unique things that's taking place is that there are many of you who've never studied at the Hartman Institute before. So first, welcome into our Beit Midrash. And you don't know me. And you all don't know fully the Torah of the Hartman Institute. But let me start by saying something really important because it'll free me to be much more relaxed throughout my lecture. When I say Judaism, I am by definition saying my understanding of Judaism and my selection of those parts of Judaism that are most essential within my upbringing and within my philosophy and approach to life and to Judaism. At the Hartman Institute, there is no such thing as Judaism says. And I want to tell you, anytime someone comes to you and says, Judaism says, run out of the room as fast as you can. Because it's the wrong tradition. There is no Judaism, there's Judaisms. I am now going to take a journey into the tradition. I'm going to look at what I think is important, but you know fully well that there could be somebody in a Beit Midrash right next door, and I recommend you visit it as well. Not next door, but nearby, other Batei Midrash, other places of study. They also have a Torah. And so this, I know from the beginning that I am selecting. We all select. The only difference at the Hartman Institute is that we admit that we select. Because that's all that a person could ever do when they're coming to read a text and read a tradition. And so this central idea of that Judaism should be something that you should live by starts, the source of it is in the book of Deuteronomy. In the book of Leviticus. In Leviticus it says, the Lord spoke to Moses saying, speak to the Israelite people and say to them, I, the Lord, am your God. You shall not copy the practices of the land of Egypt where you dwelt, or of the land of Canaan to which I am taking you. You shall not follow their laws. My rules alone shall you observe, and faithfully follow my laws. I, the Lord, am your God. You shall keep my laws and my rules by the pursuit of which man shall live, or human being shall live. I am the Lord. What is the meaning of Leviticus? In the language of the Bible, God says, Jews, you have a choice. You could follow the practices of Egypt, and you could follow the practices of Canaan. But I want to tell you, if you follow the practices of Egypt or the practices of Canaan, your destiny is death. If you want to live, Torah is the only way you could live. Now, you have freedom of choice. You could choose life or you could choose death. Now, choose. And when God says this is a way of life by which you shall live, this is not a mere description. This is a prescription. Do you want to live? This is how you will live, because I, the God, master of history and nature, have set up the world to work that way. And so, the tractate, the Gemara in Yoma, in source 6, then asks, Rabbi Ishmael, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah were once on a journey, with Levi Hasadar and Rabbi Ishmael, son of Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, following them. Then this question was asked of them, whence do we know that in the case of danger to human life, the laws of the Sabbath are suspended? Now, the laws of Sabbath, the only law, the only holiday in the Ten Commandments, the day in which you recognize and remember the God, creator of the universe, the God who took you out of Egypt. Now, what's the question that the rabbis ask? Notice that in the language, they don't ask, what's more important? Or what takes precedence? Shabbat or human life? No. They set the standard in the question. They say, from whence do we know that in the case of danger to human life, the laws of the Sabbath are suspended? We already know that's the law. This is where we want to get to. Now, how do you build an argument? And what's beautiful about the rabbis is their honesty. They're not pretending as if they're coming as open slates, just coming to the tradition, waiting for it to implant ideas on their minds. No, they're asking a question. This is where we want to go. We believe that in monotheism, the sanctity of life takes precedence over the holiest day. Where do we know this? And it's almost as if they turn to the rabbis and say, give me proof. And that's exactly what the Talmud proceeds to do. And various rabbis come forth and try to offer different arguments. Oh, I have this argument and this one and this one. Some are better, some are worse, as is always the case. In the second paragraph, the third line, Rabbi Yonatan ben, son of Joseph, said, for it is holy unto you. The Sabbath is committed to your hands, not you to its hands. What a beautiful idea. The Shabbos is holy. Holy, you would think. It's holy to God. No, it's holy to you. The holiness of Shabbat should mean you should die for it. Not at all. It's holy to you. This holiest day is given to you. It's in your hands. And that means you take precedence over the Shabbat. Rabbi Shimon ben, son of Manasseh, B is Ben, son, said, and the Lord of and the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbaths. The Torah said, profane for his sake one Sabbath so that he may keep many Sabbaths. Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh says, Shabbos is more important than human life. But we're going to desecrate the Shabbat, because if I desecrate the Shabbat, the net gain will be more Shabbos is kept. I have to figure out, how do I maximize the Shabbos observances? And I maximize it by not dying on it. And this is actually what happened with the Maccabees, because people used to attack Jews on the Shabbat because they knew they wouldn't defend themselves. No, the Shabbos is put aside, so this way we can maximize the Shabbat. What's more important? Not human life. So the rabbis are already debating this, until finally, Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, if I had been there, I would have told them something better than what they said. And he quotes Leviticus and says, he shall live by them, but he shall not die because of them. And Rabbah says, the exposition of all of them could be refuted except that of Samuel, which cannot be refuted. You shall live by them and not die by them is not a description of how God is going to respond to your sinful behavior or your righteous behavior. But it is a principle which says that Torah has to be a way of life. Now, this idea that at this moment, when we're struggling with how do we respond, what's the most important thing that I have to do? What should be my personal policy, my public policy, my national policy? Something very powerful and simple when you say the most important thing, more important than anything else, more important than going out, and more important than work, and more important than social interaction. Life, people. There's nothing more important than life. Connecting to that core instinct is not trivial anymore. It's not trivial at all. It's as if all the rest is commentary. All the rest doesn't matter. And as a human being, your priorities have to be refocused all life. You shall live by them. And our task is to create societies where people can live by them. And I have to act individually in demand of others to act in such a way, you shall live by them. But it's not just the general statement of life, which is not trivial anymore. As many of us know, and many of the profound decisions that we have to make in our societies, as what's going to count. The priority of life is a very powerful moral statement. It's a moral statement that requires of leaders and individuals to say, people will die. What do you mean people will die? Because people die, it doesn't mean people dying is fine. Because people die, it doesn't mean that people dying is something that I could just have to accept. No, it is my job not to accept it. and that demands things of me. But it goes much deeper than that. It also requires of us, when we're talking about life, we're not talking about anything. It's just the core principle of the inherent value of life. Another feature of our tradition that was very meaningful to me is source 7, where the rabbis say, in one of my favorite texts, why did God creates lots of fish, hundreds of donkeys, millions of dinosaurs, but God creates only one human being. Therefore, but a single person was created to teach that if any person causes a single life to perish, they are deemed by Scripture as if they have caused a whole world to perish. And anyone who saves a single soul, they are determined by Scripture as if they've saved a whole soul, a whole universe. It's not merely that life takes precedence. Life is everything. Life is a whole universe. And when it comes to life, you also don't do mathematics. Every life, every single life is worthy of fighting for. But even more than that. Again, but a single person was created for the sake of peace among humankind, that one should not say to another, my Father is greater than your Father. If I'm really committed to you shall live by them, the value of life, all humanity shares with me that life. And I was thinking about it, as I'm sure many of you were, different moments over the last number of months. I was wondering what was going to happen if, chas v'shalom, it happened, that there was a major outbreak in Gaza. And what would happen if they needed 1,000 ventilators? Would we distribute it evenly? Who, I'm going to come in a moment, who claims me? But life, that's the real curve that needs to be flattened. I am compelled by the idea that all human beings are created in the image of God. Nobody's life, nobody's father or mother is better than someone else's. Nobody could claim that I'm superior to another. And that in our tradition, life transcends the tradition itself. These were important moments for me. Another moment which was very important, and I experienced it here in Israel, and I'm sure you all experienced it in different ways in your communities. Life's important, and everybody claims me. But what happens if somebody's not behaving appropriately? What happens if somebody is not taking care, and now they're going to come and claim the same respirator that I might need? And I'm being careful, but they're not. Does human behavior in any way impact my responsibility to them? And part of the problem of living in a society is we don't have the same moral pivots. We don't all have the same sense of responsibility. I know I started to feel this, and my sins I confess here today. I started to wonder, what are my responsibilities to the Haredi community? 70% of the people on the ventilators came from 10% of society. Is that fair? Were they acting responsibly? Does my responsibility to life, do they claim me to the same degree? And the reason why it's so important is that when life's fine and everything is going, I don't even think about it. But it's precisely when I'm broken. It's precisely when I'm frightened. Now your values are really tested. And I struggled with this for a long time. And it's in the midst of that struggle that a Mishnah in Gittin reminded me. Source 9, if a man sells himself and his children to a heathen, he is not to be redeemed. Under Jewish law, anyone in our community who is taken captive, we have a responsibility to pay to bring them home. But if you sell yourself, bets are off. We're not responsible for you. I'm responsible for you only if you're responsible for you. My responsibility to you can't be greater than your responsibility to you. His children, however, are to be redeemed after the death of their father, under the assumption that once the father is gone, the children will be converted out, no one will protect them, and therefore there is some pikuach nefesh. Their life is in danger, either physically or spiritually, and therefore we have to bring them back. Rav Asa said, now I'll come to the Gemara. This rule of not redeeming somebody who sold himself or herself is only if he sold himself a second or a third time. I love this line. Like, this is just, wow. What does this mean? The first time you sell yourself, we're going to redeem you. Why? Because every human being has a right to be an idiot. Every human being is going to be an idiot. That's what it means to be a human being. You want to be an idiot? You want to make a fundamental mistake? We got you. It's the second time that I'm going to claim you. It's the next time. And when I saw the ultra-Orthodox community, after they understood keeping masks more than the people in Tel Aviv, I remembered it's a second or third time. Human life has value and it claims you, and you don't just jump and forget about it. Human life is going to claim you, and every human being has a right to be an idiot. It's almost expected. It's the rules of the game. I love that. See, human life has infinite value, and we understand exactly who these human beings are. You have to have compassion. But you think they're the only ones who made mistakes? Which one of us hasn't been an idiot on an ongoing basis? The question is not whether you're going to err. The question is how many times you're going to repeat it. Frankly, I'm more comfortable with 3 times because it's usually after 3 times that I finally get it. But here they're a little more strict. But I love this idea. It's just what a way to look at human beings. Not sitting there judging you. Humanity. It's who we are. And it's human life of humanity in all of its totality that's important. But there's one other beautiful statement here. A certain man sold himself to the Lydians, who were, in all probability, ran gladiator events. And thus his life was in danger. And he appealed to Rabbi Ami, saying, redeem me. So he said, we have learned that if a man sells himself and his children to a heathen, he's not to be redeemed. But his children are to be redeemed after the death of their father, to prevent their going astray. And then unfortunately the English stops, and I'm going to continue it for you. And Rav Ami says, and if we're supposed to redeem the children in order to protect them from going astray, even more so we are required to redeem someone and save them when their lives are in danger. And so he wants to redeem this person, even though he sold himself 2-3 times. Because the logic is, according to Rav Ami, when at the end of the day your life is on the line, all other calculations are removed. Whether you were smart or whether you were stupid, it's just not relevant right now. If life takes precedence over Shabbat, it also takes precedence over human stupidity. Now, could this always be the case? I don't know. I know that there's limits, but I want to be claimed by this. I want this to burn in front of my eyes as I'm sitting and watching and trying to determine what my society should do. Let's go on. Second principle that I reconnected to. And here I want to tell you that as I connect to principles and thoughts, things claim me without asking whether they were consistent. They claim me without asking me, 1 second, how does this work? They just came to me. They emerged from the values and ideas that I learned. And in Tractate Pesachim, in the middle of the ethical will that Rabbi Akiva gives to his son, he said, treat your Sabbath like a weekday rather than be dependent on human beings. Now, what does that mean? The Rambam puts this in the laws of tzedakah, in the laws of matnot aniyim, gifts to the poor. And he explains, what does it mean? A person should always construct himself and bear hardship rather than appeal to people at large and make himself a burden on the community. Our sages commanded, saying, make your Sabbath as a weekday and do not appeal to people at large. One way of understanding this is just like pikuach nefesh toches Shabbat, just like human life takes precedence over Shabbat, work also takes precedence over Shabbat. The need to support yourself, to take care of yourself. The part of who we are. It's not just that we need food to survive. To work, the dignity, the responsibility, the task of a human being to be able to take care of themselves and their loved ones, that also takes precedence over Shabbat. Job is not just a place to solve an immediate financial need. A job and to be able to take care of yourself is what it means to also to be a human being. To be able to have the dignity and the responsibility. Life takes precedence. But jobs. Now, so many of you were in places and moments where you had to make decisions. Who do you hire? Who do you fire? Who do you furlough? As the Rambam teaches, in source 12, one of the fundamental obligations we have to another human being is to give them a job. And now we have two values, and they both have to claim us. What does it mean to furlough somebody? What does it mean to them? Oh, they're still getting Social Security or they're still getting unemployment. What does it mean to not be deemed essential? Now, many of us had no choice. But we claimed to try to enable people to continue to work. This haunted me as I had to make decisions like many of you did. This didn't let me sleep. What do I need to do? I have 350 employees. What do I do? How do I balance? How am I claimed by this? And how do I ask, what does my institution mean as a Jewish institution? Now, it doesn't mean we can do, and I'm not sitting here in judgment of anybody. And I remember teaching this text a month or two ago with a director of a JCC who had to furlough 190 of their 200. I'm not judging anybody. In general, nobody should judge anybody. Just try to be a mensch. But how pained are you? And how do we create a society which cares about this very, very deeply? The third value that kept on emerging over the last number of months is that while the pandemic is universal, and we saw how small the world is, one single person from one space could travel. Here in America, here in Israel, Israelis and Jews from America were the ones who spread 70% of the corona here. How susceptible, how small our universe is, one person traveling to another place. the same time, we deeply understood that while the disease and its infection, the pandemic, is global, very often the solutions and the cure are very, very local. If you have a president or a prime minister who gets up and says, you know, people are going to die, it's the natural course of things, or do you get up, you have a president or a prime minister like we had here in Israel at the time who said, we are going to protect our parents. We're going to protect life. Those decisions over 2 weeks, 3, everything changed. Does your president or prime minister wear a mask? Do they not wear a mask? Do we encourage masks? What do we do? The culture of your society? You know, we were all, every one of the statistics, we know the global numbers, but our real numbers are in our neighborhood, our city, our state, our country. The world became much smaller, not flatter. We flattened the curve, but the world became very curvy. And I reconnected. I was always connected to it, but I reconnected very deeply to the idea in source 15, thou shalt surely open your hands to your brother, to the poor. Not in source 15, source 14. Rabbi Yosef learned, if you lend money to any of my people that is poor with thee or by thee, this teaches that if a choice lies between my people, your people, and another people, heathen, my people has preference. The poor or the rich, poor takes precedence. That's simple. The poor, that's your family, and the poor of the town, your poor comes first. The poor of your city and the poor of another town, your city comes first. The poor of thy own town has priority. That in our thoughts about tzedakah, we don't start with tikkun olam. We don't start with the whole universe. You start local. Love your neighbor as yourself. And that creating a moral universe doesn't begin with loving all humankind, but making sure that in your space, the person who you see, they claim you. There has to be something that when you see them, as Levinas says, when you see their eyes and they see you, something fundamentally changes. It's at that moment that moral responsibility grows. It doesn't grow from an amorphic sense only of humankind being created in the image of God. No, you claim me. The particular claims me. My neighborhood, my country, my state, my city. But at the same time, thou shalt surely open thy hand unto thy brother, to thy poor, in source 15. I know this only of the poor of thine own city. Because you're opening up someone reaches out your hand, that's the person you see. But what about the poor of the other city that you don't see? That's why it says, thou shalt surely open, implying all cases. And as Mishneh Avot says, if I am not for myself, who is for me? But if I am only for myself, then who am I? My nation, my family, those who are closest to me, claim me first. But if they're the only ones who claim you, then who are you? To what extent do you fully integrate the idea that all human beings are created in the image of God? We only have a few minutes left, and so I'm going to do what no teacher is supposed to do, but I do it all the time anyway. As some of you know me, I'm just going to start speaking very, very quickly so I can get through every one of the ideas. Not really. Another idea central idea of our tradition that was very important to me at this time was the idea in the laws of tzedakah that what a person needs, if I want to be a moral human being, if I want to create a moral society, if I want to create moral policy in my society, how do I determine what a person needs? Just like a job is not just a means of putting food at the table. One of the beautiful things of the laws of tzedakah of our tradition is that we never quantified need only in terms of money. We understood dignity. And we also understood that not everybody needs the same thing. And maybe one of the key differences is how do I act as individually and how do I act as society? And maybe a great society is where we have this double measure. That on the one hand, society as a whole has to be able to deal with all of its citizens, qua citizens, without discriminating against anybody, but the individual also has to say, one second, who needs something else? And this old iconic story of Hillel, who went to support a wealthy family. And he would not only give them food, but they were used to somebody running, a slave running in front of them. And when they couldn't find someone, he himself ran in front of them. Because that's what they needed. Now it's obscene. That's what you need? Now I don't know if I agree with Hillel. And every idea, when you take it to its extreme, stinks. We know that. So forget that. Is there 10% there? As we see lives broken and as we see people struggling. When I see people, what do I see? And I remember that the laws of tzedakah are not just giving money, but how you give it. Because what a person needs is also their dignity. And they need a whole spectrum of things from me. And it's so easy in a time when things are broken to just throw solutions and quantify everybody the same. When you see lots of broken people, you see lots of broken people who are broken in very different ways and who need very, very different things. And how do we make room for that idea? The last idea that I'm going to share with you today, or second to last idea, is what does it mean to be a citizen in a society? How do we see ourselves? I was loved by my parents. And I was raised to say, Donniel, you're a gift. And that's a nice way to be raised. Makes you feel really good, safe. Donniel, you're a gift. And if I would do something wrong, and I remember I would often do something wrong, I remember my mother would say to me, Donniel, who made you do it? Because you're a gift. You would never do something bad. But if people come into the public sphere and say, I'm a gift, are we really going to be responding and treating others the way that we should be treating them? One of the things that I experienced very deeply in Corona is that I'm not a gift. I could also infect people. I could be a source of harm and danger. And I reconnected to all those laws of if you dig a pit and someone falls into that pit in the public sphere, you're responsible. Because, I didn't tell them to walk into the pit. But you dug the pit, or if your cow gores another cow. And I remember in yeshiva as a child, who even thought about a cow goring another? I have no idea what you're talking about. Who has a cow? I'm a gift. What does it mean for us as fellow citizens to recognize we could be a source for harm? I remember this every time I leave my house, this little piece of material. Every time I forget, I go, oh, I forgot my mask, and I run back. I now carry 2 masks, one that I wear and a spare in my pocket. Because I'm responsible. Here. This one actually ripped, so now I'm using the spare. I could infect somebody. Something very important about this idea. Something very, very important. That when we enter into the public sphere, our responsibility is to create a space in which others know that they could be safe from me. And as the text continues in the book of Deuteronomy, that when somebody's in trouble, not only do I recognize that I could be a source of pain, but it's my responsibility not to remain indifferent, not to ignore, and to be the solution. Corona has changed for me, reinvigorated, reinforced. What does it mean to be a just, not a human being, a citizen? How do we walk in the sphere? What does a public sphere look like? It's not a sphere where give me. It's not a sphere where I have the right to be the master of the world. It's a place where I ask myself, Donniel, you could harm. I could harm people. I could also, and am, destroying the universe. All of a sudden I have to see myself completely differently. Corona has the potential to really push us out of a core sense of entitlement to a recognition that I could be a pit or an ox in the public sphere. Forget my ox goring another ox. You breathing. How do you act? How do you drive? What do you consume? Are you part of the solution? How do we create a public sphere which is safe? Safe for everybody to be there. Will only happen when we all recognize that we could also be profound and significant sources of harm. The last idea that I want to share with you is one that I struggle with. And it's one that I try most of my life to deny. I love the myth of stability which I construct. I work so hard to control. I have 2, 3, 4. When I travel, I bring a spare to the spare of the spare. Luggage, I have backups to backups. I live my life that way. The people around me, I try to protect them that way. What could I do? But every one of us knows that right outside it's this thin. And Corona comes and tells us it's this thin. Death is right around. Harm is right there. Loss of income is right there. Loss of dignity. Everything that how are you? Fine, thank you. I hate it, but part of me is all about being able to say, how are you? I'm fine, thank you, because I'm prepared. And Corona teaches us a big lesson. In source 23, our rabbis teach us, the Holy One, blessed be He, gave Israel 3 precious gifts. And all of them were given only through suffering. Something fundamentally broken. I would use other words, but I don't know some of you, and you might take it in the wrong way. Something wrong. Suffering is just too close. Corona challenged me to ask myself, is that myth of stability worth it? What are the prices that I pay to myself, to those around me? Can we embrace our brokenness? That's part of my moral pivot that I haven't decided yet. I'm still working on that one. I don't know. When there's going to be a vaccine, are we just all going to go back? Life. Superhumans. Or is there something very important about maintaining that brokenness as an aspect of our life? How big, how small, I'm not sure yet. But I know that I'm not the same. Like I joke and say, COVID hasn't impacted me psychologically at all. Just every human being who comes near me, I think that they're my enemy. But no, it's really, I'm just fine, thank you. Maybe not. I'm trying to build my moral pivot. I'm trying to ask, how has the last 3 months and the months that are going to come changed who I am? How do I hold on to it? And how do I try to grow from it? How has it added to me, for me, perspectives that I knew but I didn't know? How does it reinforce the way I think or change the way I think? How do I live with all of this complexity? And our rabbis teach us that when you're in the midst of a moment of such unbelievable complexity, should a person say, how in these circumstances could I learn? Somebody says it's pure, someone says it's impure, someone says do this, someone says do that, someone says go here, go there, this is the right thing, no that. What do you do? How do I create a consistent whole? The rabbis say, forget a consistent whole. Make your ear like a hopper and get thee a perceptive heart to understand the words of those who pronounce unclean and the words of those who pronounce clean, the words of those who prohibit and the words of those who permit, the words of those who disqualify and the words of those who declare fit. Forget trying to put it all together and forget the consistency. A moral pivot, a foundation is not a coherent thesis. It's about opening your heart and having a heart of many rooms. A heart where there's a room for lots of different values and ideas. And you're never going to get it right, nor are you supposed to. That's not what this is about. It's about trying to be a little more decent tomorrow than we were today. And it's about using this profound, profound tragedy that has altered our lives. And to say, how do we grow from it? Oh, I could spend a lot of time blaming. I could blame this person who started it, and I can call this is where it came, and this country didn't do what's right, and this prime minister or president, or I have everybody in the world who I could blame, and the truth is some blame is deserved. But at the end of the day, we're going to be better human beings when we don't look for causal relationships between pain and behavior alone. But when we ask, what do I see now differently? And how do I become more insightful? How do I see others differently? How do I see myself? How do I see the purpose of my life and the purpose of my institution, the purpose of my community, the purpose of my nation? Jerusalem was destroyed because we failed. But as human beings, we always fail. It is our destiny to fail. But we also have the potential to learn. And whether we as a society will learn from Corona and grow and take a step higher, that's the question that plagues me. That's the question that haunts me. And the resolution to that question is in my hands and it's in your hands. And how we deal with that and answer those questions will shape our world. Thank you very, very much. And now, I don't know if this is going to work, but now if some of you had questions and Jordana has them, I'll be able to hear them, and I'm going to write them down, and we're going to take hopefully 2 questions at a time, and then maybe we can have some form of a dialogue. Jordana?
Hi. Our first question is, with regard to redeeming others, what are the appropriate actions in a world of limited resources? If there is a person who has acted prudently and another who has not, and there's only one ventilator, must you treat them equally?
Okay, we're off to a great start because you're asking me questions for which I have no answer. I have thoughts. For these great questions, nobody has an answer. Limited resources, I know, is precisely the moment when our values are really tested. It's when not yes and yes and yes. In abundance, life is simple. In the Garden of Eden, there are no moral dilemmas. And I don't know. All I know is that I want to be a person who understands that the value of human life requires that I transcend my particular community, that I transcend questions of race, religion, gender, all the things that cause me to create who's me and who, all the me's and them's. And that at a certain moment I also don't ask, what did you do? Because as a human being, I know you're supposed to be stupid. I want to tell you, I want to be such a person. Can I be such a person? I'm not saying necessarily that I can, and your questions really is correct. Now, the medical boards who have to determine kidneys and livers, they don't ask, well, you smoked, therefore you're wrong. They ask questions about survivability, which might pertain to the second question. But at the same time, I don't want to discount your question as being, it's right, I don't know. But what I do know are what are the values that I want to bring to the table and I want to struggle. And then I'm going to make decisions, and sometimes I'm going to make the wrong ones, but I'm going to have to make a decision. In many ways, I felt as I was thinking about this question, it constantly put me back to the time when I was in as a tank commander in the war in Lebanon, and I had to decide, because I'm the one who I didn't have to say who goes on a ventilator, but I had to say esh. I had to command fire, and from my command, I could destroy. Who do I pick? When do I pick? Is my life someone else's life? How do I distinguish between combatants, non-combatants? And it's a mess. And part of we're at war now. We're in that morality of war, and it is here that we're going to be tested. And so your question is too profound for me to say, do this. I don't know. But I know that in a certain sense, human life has to transcend everything. And at the same time, I know that the realities and contingencies require me that I don't always have that luxury. Welcome to our struggle, my friend. I wish I had more than that, but I don't. I do know that I started to feel that I was wrong when I was saying we should distinguish the Haredim, they're not my problem. I felt I had stepped over a line. I felt that I started to see them as an enemy because they're claiming something that I might need. All human life has to even the field in some sense. But I know fully well that sometimes we can't do that. I wish I could be more definitive. But the depth of your question, I believe, deserves that it be left as an open question. And very often a moral life is not about answers, it's about the things that you struggle with. And at the end, you make decisions. And very often, sometimes is it just lottery? Is that the best way? Or is there a way to, I don't know. But I do know that we're tested and we're going to be challenged on it now. In very different ways. Just like I would hope that Israeli society would not turn and say, to the people in Gaza, excuse me, you've sent missiles, what plague on all your houses? That they would claim me, and that I somehow would find a balance between worrying about myself and worrying about others. So what am I supposed, I don't know. Thank you for the question. And I apologize for the open-ended nature of the answer, but it's all that I have. It's just the struggle.
Our traditions speak about individual rights for myself and a covenantal relationship. If only myself, what am I? Are there moments when the moral demands of one is greater than the other? Which is it for you now?
It's similar to the first question. I feel, we went through a very difficult time, my family, over the last number of months, when we had to get my father-in-law into Israel because there was a treatment for a cancer that he had that was only available in Israel, Germany, and Australia. And he would die in Florida. And Israel said, no. only citizens. And I understood. But I fought like a Meshugana and pulled every single connection that I had, and we got him to come. It was two months too late, and he died today, just today, it was the Shloshim of his death. I know maybe individuals have to, I think there's something, I wasn't wrong in fighting for my father-in-law. But I also know that the society has to look out for itself. And again, it's the same answer as I gave before, because, and this is, I want to explain what I'm trying to do here, and your questions are beautiful, but I want to turn them back to you, not pedagogic, because that's what they deserve to be. Because I'm not a Shulchan Aruch, I'm not a rabbi giving a psak, I'm not giving you here, this is what you should do. I'm not the moral ethicist expert sitting here and saying, okay, in this case, it's not that way. I'm just saying these are the moral values that create the mess in my life. And that somehow I hope that both give expression. And you want to know, by the way, why my father-in-law got in here? And I had I pulled and pulled and pushed, and you wouldn't believe what we tried. At the end, there was a very minor pakid, bureaucrat in the Ministry of Interior, who said, you know what? This man's going to die. I know what I'm doing illegally. It's on me. And she signs the document. Sometimes that's what it means to be a human being. To be touched at that moment. And sometimes you have to do policies. Moral pivots don't create answers. They actually create a profound struggle, which sometimes is too difficult. And part of living with the brokenness is not to give in and just to say, yes, that claims me. And sometimes to allow it to go with there. And inconsistency is phenomenal. Phenomenal. Allow yourself that. And that's why societies are based on what I do as an individual, the policies of my family, the policies of my neighborhood, the policies of my city, the policies of my government. And I live within each one of them. And each one has to speak. And at the end, welcome to the struggle. The Hartman Institute, I don't want to answer. I can't take it any further than that. I feel it would be disrespectful to the depth of, not of only the question, the reality that every single one of us knows that we're living in right now. Jordana? And I apologize, by the way. Jordana, just one second. I apologize, because since you're not in the room, I can't see how you feel, and I can't see how angry you are, and whether you feel I'm really trying to be as respectful. Please do not interpret the limitations of my answers as disrespect to the question, but it's rather a recognition that you're asking questions, the answer to which is, and that's the best I can. Yes, please, Jordana.
As we strive to put life first, what definitions of living should we focus on? Is preserving a life the same as preserving communal life? Can we truly live right now without putting the health of others at risk?
Since I want to go on, and Jordana, I need you to ask me a question, the answer to which is not going to be I don't know. So I need you to vary them a little bit, because I appreciate, and you're asking great questions. Can we live without putting other people at risk? I think we can. Or I think we have to come as damn close as possible. I think we have to be haunted by it. And if we do so with unbelievable humility, not with a capriciousness of saying, okay, that's it, shit's going to happen, life, I got to go to work. You claim me, and if I have to live, fine. But I can live. I can wear a mask, I can exercise social distancing, I could wash my hands, I could do as much as possible. I could limit the amount of people that enter into a room. I don't have to say, you know what, we can't, and therefore it's all, let it go. It doesn't have to be. We could strive to maximize our life, but still recognize that the other life takes precedence. Remember the source who said, if someone comes to you and says, kill someone else, otherwise I'm going to kill you. Our tradition says you have to accept death, because who said that your blood is redder? Something that has to claim you. And if you're claiming your rights, and you're endangering someone, you do so with trepidation, and you do every single thing in your power to ensure that you are not the ox, and you're not the pit, and that you're not promulgating harm amongst other human beings. Jordana?
Yes, we have another question. Is there a ritual right now that would help us as a community? As you mentioned, fasting.
There are many rituals. And each one of us has different, and I love the question, and thank you for it. And again, I want to turn it back and say, I want to share with you some rituals, but part of what we need is to develop rituals. One of the rituals, what I mentioned at the beginning, is the ritual of Ta'anit, the ritual of declaring days of mourning. Days in which we just stop. We stop. And because we stopped a month, we should stop again. Our world is not whole, and as we rush to put it together, we're gonna miss something. Declaring, and my colleague and friend and teacher, Rabbi Tamar Elad Applebaum, reminded me of this when she and a bunch of other rabbis say, Donniel, would you sign, and we want to declare a day of mourning? I said, I forgot. We're not supposed to be fine when we're not fine. And halacha challenged you, declare a day of mourning so that you can give space to feelings that you don't allow. Now, for me, that is also, it's very much a deep part of what the Shabbat means for me. A day in which I connect to how much I am not under control. I'm not in control. Now, it's really hard because every day is a Shabbat for many of you. Where all we are is Shabbat. But that idea of letting go and to reconnect to our lack of control as a space to ask how we build. But I would like to, and I hope out of this summer, and I know some of our scholars are working on this, I think we need to develop some new rituals. Now, our tradition declares days of fast throughout the year. Maybe Tisha B'Av this year, that's its purpose. You know, Tisha B'Av, that holiday, that day of mourning, which we put all 59 different calamities. Now, because Jews, we fast every day, we're fasting every day. So we say on Tisha B'Av, miraculously, 47 different catastrophes occurred. I think Tisha B'Av this year is going to have significance on not why Jerusalem was destroyed alone, or the temple, but about the deaths that we've all experienced and the pain. We need to create new prayers, new rituals, new ways of recognizing and giving space to the pain that we're experiencing so that we can grow from it. And we have a number of rituals now, but I think we need to develop new ones as well. And your question and challenge are ones that I hope a lot of us together are going to work on addressing. I know Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is going to be different, but now in just a few weeks, Tisha B'Av is there. And I think we have a lot of time to seriously prepare and to ask, how do we use that day? To give space for our brokenness. Thank you. And we have time for one more question, Jordana.
What are the implications of our current societal definitions of being essential and being vulnerable? Do they have spiritual or religious implications?
Thank you, and of course they do. One of the things that so many of us experienced is people deciding who's essential and who's not essential. Whose jobs need to be saved and whose jobs do not need to be saved. Maybe, and this is my riff on your question, maybe when we all connect to the fact of how vulnerable we are, none of us are walking around with such clarity as to whether we're essential or not essential. Maybe all of our vulnerability, in a certain sense, flattens. There's a very deep spiritual, religious, and moral obligation, not only to value human life, but to value the essential feature of every human life. And that's part of what I understand with the notion of a job. You're essential. You're needed. You're important. And you know when I don't see someone else as important? I don't see them as important when I take up all the space in the world. That's when I don't see them as, when is it that somebody else loses their essentiality? It's when I'm so essential. And maybe this is a good place to end with as many of you who know me, the beautiful idea in Lurianic Kabbalah, where it's asked, how does the world exist if God is all present, omnipresent, and speaks about the fact that in the act of creation, God contracts God's self to enable the world to come into existence. The spiritual and religious significance at this moment is that our vulnerability should make it easier for each and every one of us to contract. We're interconnected. We're vulnerable to each other. You're not the world. It's easy right now. Anybody who thinks that they're the world, I don't know where they've been in the last. Every one of us is this close away from death. Every one of us is this close away from suffering. Every one of us has suffered. Every one of us is broken. We're not whole. And maybe in the midst of that, the deep spiritual, religious, and moral lesson is that I can meet another human being who's also broken as me. And just as I'm searching and hoping that I'm essential, they too are hoping that they're essential. And maybe I could reach out to them and say, hi, shalom aleichem, let's be essential together. Let's embrace our brokenness and together create some wholeness. Thank you very, very much for being with me today. Thank you very, very much for joining us this month. I hope this month is a month of serious learning, serious connecting, serious challenging, serious growing. And in the spirit of the Hartman Institute, I hope it's real. There'll be some answers, lots of questions. It's a journey. It's a journey, as I said at the beginning, not to give an answer to the meaning of life, but how do we live a life of meaning? It was an honor to be with you and to open up our program this summer. And I look forward to seeing you again during the summer, and also one day very soon, also in person. Shalom. And in Jerusalem, Laila Tov.